Welcome back to reading of Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, reading Volume 2, Chapters 6 and 7. To obviate the danger of this threat being fulfilled, Mr. Linton commissioned me to take the boy home early on Catherine's pony, and said he, "As we shall now have no influence over his destiny, good or bad, you must say nothing of where he is gone to my daughter. She can't associate with him hereafter, and it is better for her to remain in ignorance of his proximity, lest she should be restless and anxious to visit the Heights. Merely tell her his father sent for him suddenly, and he has been obligated to leave us." Linton was very reluctant to be roused from his bed at 5 o'clock, and astonished to be informed that he must prepare, for he was going to spend some time with his father, Mr. Heathcliff, who wished to see him so much he did not like to defer the pleasure till he should recover from his late journey. "My father!" he cried in strange perplexity. "Mamma never told me I had a father. Where does he live? I'd rather stay with uncle." "He lives in a little distance from the Grange," I replied, "just beyond those hills, not so far, but you may walk over there when you get hearty, and you should be glad to go home, and to see him. You must try to love him as you did your mother, and then he will love you. "But why have I not heard of him before?" asked Linton. "Why didn't Mamma and he live together, as other people do?" "He had business to keep him in the north," I answered, "and your mother's health required her to reside in the south." "And why didn't Mamma speak to me about him?" persevered the child. "She often talked of uncle, and I learnt to love him long ago, but how am I to love Papa? I don't know him." "Oh, all children love their parents," I said. "Your mother, perhaps, thought you would want to be with him if she mentioned him often to you. Let us make haste. An early ride on such a beautiful morning is such preferable to an hour's more sleep." "Is she to go with us?" he demanded. "The little girl I saw yesterday?" "Not now," replied I. "His uncle?" he continued. No, I shall be your companion there," I said. Linton sank back in his pillow and fell into a brown study. "I won't go without uncle," he cried at length. "I can't tell where you mean to take me." I attempted to persuade him of his naughtiness, of showing reluctance to meet his father. Still he obstinately resisted any progress towards dressing, and I had to call for my master's assistance in coaxing him out of bed. The poor thing was finally got off with several delusive assurances about that his absence would be short, that Mr. Edgar and Catherine would visit him, and other promises equally ill-founded that I invented and reiterated at intervals throughout the way. The pure heather-scented air, and the bright sunshine, and the gentle canter of Minnie relieved his despondency after a while. He began to put questions concerning his new home and its inhabitants with greater interest and liveliness. "Is Wuthering Heights as pleasant a place as Thrushcross Grange?" he inquired, turning to take a last glance into the valley, whence a night mist mounted and formed fleecy clouds on the skirts of the blue. "It is not so buried in trees," I replied, "and it is not quite so large, but you can see the country beautifully all round, and the air is healthier for you, fresher and drier. You will perhaps think the building old and dark at first, though it is a respectable house, the next best in the neighbourhood, and you will have such nice rambles on the moors. Harriet Earnshaw, that is Miss Cathy's older cousin, and so yours in a manner, will show you all the sweetest spots, and you can bring a book in fine weather and make a green hollow your study. And now and then your uncle may join you in his walks. He does frequently walk out on the hills." And what is my father like?" he asked. "Is he as young and handsome as uncle?" "He's as young," I said, "but he has black hair and eyes, and looks sterner. He is taller and bigger altogether. He has not seemed to you so gentle and kind at first, perhaps because it is not his way. Still, mind you be frank and cordial with him, and naturally he will be fonder of you than any uncle of you are his own, for you are his own." "Black hair and eyes," mused Linton. "I can't fancy him. Then I am not like him, am I?" "Not much," I answered. "Not a morsel," I thought, surveying with regret his white complexion, slim frame of my companion, and his large, languid eyes. His mother's eyes, save that, unless a morbid touchiness kindled them a moment, they had not a vestige of her sparkling spirit. "How strange that he should never come to see Mamma and me," he murmured. "Has he ever seen me? If he have, I must have been a baby. I remember not a single thing about him." "Why, Mr. Linton," said I, 300 miles is a great distance, and 10 years seems very different in length to a grown-up person compared to what they do to you. It is probable Mr. Heathcliff proposed going from summer to summer, but never found a convenient opportunity, and now it is too late. Don't trouble him with questions on the subject. It will disturb him for no good." The boy was fully occupied with his own cogitations for the remainder of the ride till we halted before the farmhouse garden gate. I watched to catch the impression in his countenance that he surveyed the carved front and low-browed lattices, the straggling gooseberry bushes, and cooked firs with solemn intentness, and then shook his head. His private feelings entirely disapproved of the exterior of his new abode, but he had sense to postpone complaining. There might be compensation within. Before he dismounted, I went and opened the door. It was 6:30. The family had just had finished breakfast. The servant was clearing and wiping the table. Joseph stood by his master's chair, telling some tale concerning a lame horse, and Hareton was preparing for the hayfield. "Hallo, Nelly!" cried Mr. Heathcliff when he saw me. "I feared I should come down and fetch my property myself. Have you brought it? Have you? Let us see what we can make of it." He got up and strode to the door. Hareton and Joseph followed in gaping curiosity. Poor Linton ran a frightened eye over the faces of the three. "Surely," said Joseph after a great inspection, "he swooped ye master and yon Silas." Heathcliff, having stared his son into an argue of confession, uttered a scornful laugh. "God, what a beauty, what a lovely, charming thing!" he exclaimed. "Haven't they reared it on snails and sour milk, Nelly? Oh, damn my soul! But that's worse than I expected, and the devil knows I was not sanguine." I bade the trembling and bewildered children get down and enter. He did not thoroughly comprehend the meaning of his father's speech, or whether it was intended for him. Indeed, he was not yet certain that the grim, sneering stranger was his father, but he clutched to me with growing trepidation. Then on Mr. Heathcliff's taking a seat and bidding him come hither, he hid his face to my shoulder and wept. "Tut, tut," said Mr. Heathcliff, stretching out a hand and dragging him through between his knees, and then holding up his hand by the chin. "None of that nonsense. We're not going to hurt thee, Linton. Isn't that thy name? Thou art my mother's child entirely. Where is my share in thee pulling chicken?" He took off the boy's cap and pushed back his thick flaxen curls, felt his slender arms and his small fingers, during which examination Linton ceased crying and lifted his great blue eyes to inspect the inspector. "Do you know me?" asked Heathcliff, having satisfied himself that the limbs were all equally frail and feeble. "No," said Linton, with a gaze of vacant fear. "You've heard of me, I dare say." "No," he replied again. "No, what a shame of your mother, never to waken your filthy regard for me. You are my son, then, I'll tell you, and your mother was a wicked slut to leave you in ignorance of the sort of father you possessed. Now, don't wince and colour up. Though it is something to see you have not white blood. Be a good lad, and I'll do for you. Nelly, if you be tired, you may sit down. If not, get home again. I guess you'll report what you hear and see to the cipher at the Grange, and this thing won't be settled while you linger about it." "Well," replied I hope you'll be kind to the boy, Mr. Heathcliff, or you'll not keep him long, and he's all you have a kin in the wide world that you will ever know. Remember, I'll be very kind to him. You needn't fear," he said, laughing. "No one else must be kind to him. I'm jealous of monopolizing his affection. And to begin my kindness, Joseph, bring the lad some breakfast. Hareton, you infernal calf, begone to your work. Yes, Nell," he added, when they were departed, "my son is prospective owner of your place, and I shall not wish him to die till I was certain of being his successor. Besides, he's mine, and I want the triumph of seeing my descendant fairly lord of their estates, my child hiring their children to till their father's lands for wages. That is the sole consideration which can make me endure the whelp. I despise him for himself, and hate him for the memories he revives. But that consideration is sufficient. He's as safe with me, and shall be tended as carefully as your master tends his own. I have a room upstairs furnished for him in handsome style. I'll engage a tutor also to come 2 times a week from 20 miles distance to teach him what he pleases to learn. I'll order Hareton to obey him, and in fact I've arranged everything with a view to preserve the superior and the gentleman in him. Above his associates, I do regret, however, that he was so little deserved the trouble. If I wished any blessings in the world, it was to find him a worthy object of pride, and I am bitterly disappointed with the whey-faced, whining wretch." While he was speaking, Joseph returned, bearing a basin of milk porridge, and placed it before Linton. He stirred around the homely mess with a look of aversion, and affirmed he could not eat it. I saw the old man's servant shared largely in his master's scorn of the child, though he was compelled to retain his sentiment in the heart, because Heathcliff plainly meant his underlings to hold him in honour. "Cannot ate it?" he repeated, peering Linton's face and subduing his voice to a whisper for fear of being overheard. "But Master Hareton never ate nut else. when he were a little un what were good for enough for him was good for enough for you. Yeah, I was rather think. I shan't eat it, answered Linton snappishly. Take it away. Joseph snatched up the food indignantly and brought it to us. Is there out ales the victuals? He asked, thrusting the tray under Heathcliff's nose. What shall ail them? He said. Why, answered Joseph, you dainty chap says he cannot eat 'em, but guess it's all right. His mother was just so we were almost too mucky to such a corn for making her bread. Don't mention his mother to me, said the master angrily. Get him something he can eat, that's all. When is his usual food, Nelly? What is his usual food, Nelly? I suggested boiled milk or tea, and the housekeeper received instructions to prepare some. Come, I reflected, his father's selfishness may contribute to his comfort. He perceives his delicate constitution and the necessity of treating him tolerably. I'll console Mr. Edgar by acquainting him with the turn Miss Heathcliff's humour has taken. Having no excuse for lingering longer, I slipped out while Linton was engaged in timidly rebuffing the advantages of a friendly sheepdog. The advances. But he was too much on the alert to be cheated. As I closed the door, I heard a cry and a frantic repetition of the words, Don't leave me! I'll not stay here! I'll not stay here! Then the latch was raised and fell. They did not suffer him to come forth. I mounted Minnie and urged her to a trot, and so my brief guardianship ended. Chapter 7. He had said work with little Cathy that day. She rose in high glee, eager to join her cousin, and such passionate tears and lamentations followed the news of the departure that Edgar himself was obliged to soothe her by affirming that he should come back soon. He added, however, if I can get him, and there were no hopes of that. The promise poorly pacified her, but time was more potent, and though still at intervals she inquired of her father when Linton would return. Before she did see him again, his features had waxed and so dim in her memory that she did not recognize him. When I chanced to encounter the housekeeper of Wuthering Heights and paying business visits to Gimmerton, I used to ask how the young master got on, for he lived almost as secluded as Catherine herself, and was never to be seen. I could gather from her that he continued in weak health, and was a tiresome inmate. She and Mr. Heathcliff seemed to dislike him ever longer, and worse, though he took some trouble to conceal it. He had an antipathy to the sound of his voice, and could not do all with his sitting in the same room with him so many minutes together. There seldom passed much talk between them. Linton learned his lessons and spent his evenings in a small apartment they called the parlour, or else lay in bed all day, for he was constantly getting colds and coughs and aches and pains of some sort. And I never knew such a faint-hearted creature, added the woman, nor one who cares of Hazelin. He will go on if I leave the window open a bit late in the evening. Oh, it's killing a breath of night air. And he must have a fire in the middle of summer, and Joseph's pipe is poison. And he must always have sweets and dainties, and always milk forever, heeding not how the rest of us are pinched in winter. And there he'll sit wrapped in his furred cloak in the chair by his fire, and some toast and water or other slop in the hob to sip at. And if Hareton for pity comes to amuse him, Hareton is swearing, and the other crying. I believe the master would relish Earnshaw's thrashing him to a mummy if he were not his son, and I am certain he would be fit to turn him out of doors if he knew half the nursing he gives Hazelin. But then he won't go into danger of temptation. He never enters the parlour, and should Linton show those ways in the house where he is, she sends him upstairs directly. I divined from his account the utter lack of sympathy had rendered young Heathcliff selfish and disagreeable. If he were not so originally, and my interest in him consequently decayed, though still I was moved with a sense of grief at his lot, and a wish that he had been left with us. Mr. Edgar encouraged me to gain information. He thought a great deal about him, I fancy, and would have run some risk to see him, and he told me once to ask the housekeeper where he ever came into the village. She said he had only been twice on horseback accompanying his father, and both times he pretended to be quite knocked up for 3 or 4 days afterward. The housekeeper left, if I recalled rightly, 2 years after he came, and another who I don't know who was his successor. She lives there still. Time wore on at the Grange on its former pleasant way, till Miss Cathy reached 16 on the anniversary of her birthday. We never manifested any signs of rejoicing because it was also the anniversary of my late mistress's death. Her father invariably spent that day alone in the library. We walked at dusk as far as Gimmerton Kirkyard, and he would frequently prolong his stay beyond midnight. Therefore, Catherine was thrown on her own resources for amusement. The 20th of March was a beautiful spring day, and when her father had retired, my young lady came down dressed for going out, and said she was asked to have a ramble on the edge of the moors with me, and Mr. Linton had given her leave if we only went a short distance, and were back within the hour. "So make haste, Ellen," she cried. "I know where I wish to go, where a colony of moor game are settled. I want to see whether they have made their nests yet." "That must be a good distance up," I answered. "They don't breed on the edge of the moor." "No, it's not," she said. "I've got very near with Papa. I've put my bonnet and sallied out, thinking nothing more on the matter." She bounded before me and returned to my side, and was off again like a young greyhound, and at first I found plenty of entertainment in listening to the larks singing far and near, and enjoying the sweet warm sunshine, and watching her, my pet and my delight, with her golden ringlets playing loose behind, and her bright cheek as soft and pure in its bloom as a wild rose, and her eyes radiant with cloudless pleasure. She was a happy creature and an angel in those days. It's a pity she could not be content. "Well," said I, "where are your moor game, Miss Cathy? We should be at them. The Grange Park fence is a great way off now." "Oh, a little farther, only a little farther, Ellen," was the answer continually. "Climb to the hillock, past the bank, and by the time you reach the other side I shall have raised the birds." But there were so many hillocks and banks to climb and pass, and that at length I began to be weary, and told her we must halt and retrace our steps. I shouted to her as she outstripped me a long way. She either did not hear or did not regard, for she still sprang on, and I was compelled to follow. Finally she dived into a hollow, and before I came in sight of her again, she was 2 miles nearer Wuthering Heights than her own home, and I beheld a couple of persons arrest her, one of whom I felt convinced was Mr. Heathcliff himself. Cathy had been caught in the fact of plundering or at least hunting out the nest of the goose. The heights were Heathcliff's land, and he was proving the poacher. "I've never taken any nor found any," she said, as I toiled to them, expanding her hands in corroboration of the statement. "I didn't mean to take them, but Papa told me there were quantities up here, and I wished to see the eggs." Heathcliff glanced at me with an ill-meaning smile, expressing his acquaintance with the party, and consequently his malevolence towards it, and demanded who Papa was. "Mr. Linton of Thrushcross Grange," she replied. "I thought you did not know me, or you wouldn't have spoken in that way. You suppose Papa is highly esteemed and respected, then?" he said sarcastically. "And what are you?" inquired Catherine, gazing curiously on the speaker. "That man I've seen before. Is he your son?" She pointed to Harry, the individual who had gained nothing but increased bulk and strength by the addition of 2 years of his age. He seemed as awkward and rough as ever. "Miss Cathy," I interrupted, "it will be 3 hours instead of 1, then we are out presently. We must get back." "No, that man is not my son," said Heathcliff, pushing me aside, "but I have one, and you have seen him before too, and though your nurse is in a hurry, I think both you and she would be the better for a little rest, while you just turn this nab of Heath, and walk into my house. You'll get home earlier for the ease, and you shall receive a kind welcome." I whispered Catherine that she mustn't on any account accede to the proposal. It was entirely out of the question. "Why?" she asked aloud. "I'm tired of running, and the ground is dewy. I can't sit here. Let us go, Ellen. Besides, he says I have seen his son. He's mistaken, I think, but I guess where he lives. At the farmhouse I visited in coming from Penistone Crags, don't you?" "I do. Come, Nelly, hold your tongue. It will be a treat for her to look on us. Here, and get forward with the last. You shall walk with me, Nelly." No, she's not going to any such place, I cried, struggling to release my arm, which he had seized, and she was almost at the door-stones already, scampering round the brow at full speed. Her pointing companion did not pretend to escort her. He shayed off by the roadside and vanished. Mr. Heathcliff is very wrong, I continued. You mean no good, and there she'll see Linton, and all will be told as soon as ever we return, and I shall have the blame. I want her to see Linton, he replied. He's looking better these few days. If not, it's not often he's fit to be seen, and we'll soon persuade her to keep the visit secret. Where is the harm of it? The harm of it is that her father would hate me if he found I suffered her to enter the house, and I am convinced you have a bad design in encouraging her to do so, I replied. My design is as honest as possible. I inform you of its whole scope, he said, that the two cousins may fall in love and get married. I'm acting generously to your master. His young chit has no expectations, and should she second my wishes, she'll be provided for at once a joint successor with Linton. If Linton died, I answered, and his life is quite uncertain. Catherine wouldn't be the heir. No, she would not, he said. There is no clause in the will to secure it, so his property would go to me, but to prevent disputes I notion their union, and I am resolved to bring it about, and I am resolved she shall never approach your house with me again. I turned as she reached the gate when Miss Cathy waited our coming. Heathcliff bid me be quiet, and preceding us up the path, hastened to open the door. My young lady gave him several looks, as if she could not exactly make up her mind what to think of him, but now she was smiling when he met her eye, and softened his voice in addressing her. I was foolish enough to imagine the memory of her mother might disarm him from desiring her injury. Linton stood on the hearth. He had been out walking in the fields, for his cap was on, and he was calling to Joseph to keep him dry shoes. He had grown tall of his age, still wanting some mouths of 16. His features were pretty yet, and his eyes and complexion brighter, and I remembered them, though with mere temporary lustre, borrowed from the salubrious air and genial sun. Now, who is that? Asked Mr. Heathcliff, turning to Cathy. Can you tell? Your son? She said, having doubtfully surveyed first one and then the other. Yes, answered he. But is this the only time you have beheld him? Think. You have a short memory, Linton. Don't you recall your cousin, and you should to tease us so with wishing to see? What, Linton? Cried Cathy, kindling into joy, surprise in the name. Is that Linton? He's taller than I am. Are you Linton? The youth stepped forward and acknowledged himself. She kissed him fervently, and they gazed with wonder at the change time had wrought in the appearance of each. Catherine had reached her full height. Her figure was both plump and slender, elastic and steel, and her whole aspect sparkling with health and spirits. Linton's look and movements were very languid, and his form extremely slight, but he was a grace in his manner that mitigated these defects and rendered him not unpleasing. After exchanging numerous marks of fondness with him, his cousin went to Mr. Heathcliff, who lingered by the door, dividing his attentions between the objects inside and those that lay without, pretending that is to observe the latter, and really nothing that the former alone. And you are my uncle, then, she cried, reaching up to salute him. I thought I liked you, though you were cross at first. Why didn't you visit at the Grange with Thornton? To live all these years such close to neighbours, and never see us is odd. What have you done so for? I visited once or twice too often, because you were born. Before you were born, he answered. There, damn it, if you have kisses to spare, give them to Linton, and they are thrown away on me. Naughty Ellen, exclaimed Catherine, flying to attack me with her lavish caresses. Wicked Ellen, to try to hinder me from entering. But I'll take this walk every morning in future, may I, uncle? And sometimes ring papa. Won't you be glad to see us? Of course, replied the uncle, with a hardly suppressed grimace resulting from his deep aversion to both proposed visitors. But stay, he continued, turning towards the young lady. Now I think of it, I'll better tell you. Mr. Linton has a prejudice against me. We quarrelled at one of our lives with christen ferocity. And if you mention coming here to him, he'll put a veto on your visits altogether. Therefore, you must not mention it unless you to be regardless of seeing your cousin hereafter. You are come if you with, but you may come if you will, but you must not mention it. Why do you quarrel? Asked Catherine, considerably crestfallen. He thought me too poor to wed his sister, asked Heathcliff, and was grieved that I got her. His pride was hurt, and he'll never forget her. That's wrong, said the lady. Sometimes I'll tell him so, but Linton and I have no share in your quarrel. I'll not come here then. He shall come to the Grange. It'll be too far for me, cried the murmured cousin. The walk 4 miles would kill me. No, come here, Miss Catherine. Now and then, not every morning, but once or twice a week. The father launched toward his son at a glance of bitter contempt. I am afraid, Nellie, I shall lose my labour, he muttered to me. Miss Catherine, as the ninny calls her, will discover his value and send him to the devil. Now, if it had been Hareton, do you know that 20 times a day I covet Hareton with all the degradation? I'd have loved the lad had he been someone else's, but I think he's safe from her love. I'll pit him against the poultry creatures, unless it bestir itself briskly. We calculate it will scarcely last until it is 18. Oh, command the vapid thing. He's absorbed in drying his feet and never looks at her. Linton, yes, father, answered the boy. Have you nothing to show your cousin? Anything about, not even a rabbit or a measles nest? Take her into the garden, and before you change your shoes, and into the stable to see your horse. Wouldn't you rather sit here? Asked Linton, addressing Cathy in a tone which expressed reluctance to move again. I don't know, she replied, casting a longing look to the door, and evidently eager to be active. He kept his seat and shrank closer to the fire. Heathcliff rose and went into the kitchen, and from thence to the yard, calling out for Hareton. Hareton responded, and presently the two re-entered. The young man had been washing himself, as was visible by the glow of his cheeks and his wetted hair. Oh, I'll ask you, uncle, cried Miss Cathy, recollecting the housekeeper's assertion. He's not my cousin, is he? Yes, he replied. Your mother's nephew. Don't you like him? Catherine looked queer. Is he not a handsome lad? He continued. The uncivil little thing stood on tiptoe and whispered at Heathcliff a sentence in Heathcliff's ear. He laughed. Hareton darkened. I perceived he was very sensitive to subjective slights, and had obviously a dim notion of inferiority. But his master, a guardian, chased the frown by exclaiming, "You'll be the favourite among us, Hareton. She says you are what is it? Is something very flattering. Here you go with her round the farm, and behave like a gentleman. Mind, don't use any bad words, and don't stare when the young lady is not looking at you, and be quite ready to hide your face when she is, and when you speak, say your words slowly, and keep your hands out of your pockets. Be off and entertain her as nicely as you can." He watched the couple walking past the window. Earnshaw had his countenance completely averted from his companion. He seemed studying the familiar landscape with a stranger's and an artist's interest. Catherine looked a sly look at him, expressing small admiration. She then turned her attention to seek out objects of amusement for herself, and tripped merrily on, lilting a tune to supply the lack of conversation. "I've tried his tongue," observed Heathcliff. "He does not venture a single syllable all the time. Nellie, you recollect me at his age, nay, in some years younger. Did I ever look so stupid, so gomless, as Joseph calls it? Worse," I replied, "because more sullen with it. I have a pleasure in him," he continued, reflecting aloud. "He has satisfied my expectations. If he were born a fool, I should not enjoy it half so much. But he's no fool, and I can sympathize with all his feelings, having felt them myself. I know what he now suffers now. For instance, exactly, it is merely the beginning of what he shall suffer, though, and he'll never be able to emerge from his bathos of coarseness and ignorance. I've got him faster than his scoundrel of a father secured me, and lower, for he takes a pride in his brutishness. You've taught him to scorn everything extra-animal, as silly and weak. Don't you think Hindley would be proud of his son if he could see him? Almost as proud as I am of mine, but there's the difference. One is gold put to the use of paving stone, the other is tin polished to ape a service of silver. Mine has nothing valuable about it, yet I shall have the merit of making it go as far as such poor stuff can go. His had first-rate qualities, and they are lost, rendering worse than unavailing. I have nothing to regret. We would have more than any, but are aware of. And the best of it is, Hareton is damnably fond of me. You'll own that I'll have outmatched Hindley there. If the dead villain could rise from his grave to abuse me for his offspring's wrong, I should have the fun of seeing the said offspring fight him back again, indignant that he should dare to rail at the one friend he has in the world. Heathcliff chuckled a fiendish laugh at the idea. I made no reply, because I saw that he expected none. Meantime, our young companion, who sat too removed from us to hear what was said, began to evince symptoms of uneasiness. Probably repenting that he had denied himself the treat of Catherine's society for fear of a little fatigue. His father remarked the restless glances wandering to the window, and he had irresolutely extended toward his cap. "Get up, you idle boy," he exclaimed with assumed heartiness. "Anyway, after them, you are just at the corner by the stand of hives." Linton gathered his energies and left the hearth. The lattice was open, and he stepped out. I heard Cathy inquiring of her unsociable attendant what was the inscription over the door. Hareton stared up and scratched his head like a true clown. "It is some damnable writing," he answered. "I cannot read it." "Can't read it!" cried Catherine. "I can read it. It's English, but I don't know why it is there." Then giggled, his first appearance of mirth he had exhibited. "He does not know the letters," I said to his cousin. "Could you believe the existence of such a colossal dunce?" "Is he as he should be?" said Miss Catherine seriously. "Or is he simple, not right? I've questioned him twice now, and each time he looks so stupid. I think he does not understand me. I can hardly understand him, I'm sure." Linton repeated his laugh and glanced at Hareton tauntingly, who did not seem quite clear of comprehending at the moment. "There's nothing the matter but laziness in there, Earnshaw," he said. "My cousin fancies you're an idiot. There you experience the consequence of scorning book-larning, as you would say. Have you noticed, Catherine, his frightful Yorkshire pronunciation?" "Why, where the devil is the use on't?" growled Hareton, more ready in answer his daily companion. He was about to enlarge further, but the two youngsters broke into a noisy fit in merriment. My giddy Miss being delighted to discover that he might turn his strange talk to matter of amusement. "Where is the use of the devil in the sentence?" tittered Linton. "Papa told you not to say any bad words, and you can't open your mouth without one. Do try to behave like a gentleman now, do." "If thou weren't more a lass than a lad, I'd fell thee this minute. I would." "Pitiful laugh of a creature," retorted the angry boor, retreating with his face burnt with mingled rage and mortification. He was conscious of being insulted and embarrassed how to resent it. Mr. Heathcliff, having overheard the conversation as well as I, smiled when he saw him go, but immediately afterward cast a single aversion on his flippant pair, who remained chattering on the doorway. The boy, finding animation through while discussing Hareton's faults and deficiencies, his animation enough, and relating anecdotes on his goings-on, and the girl relishing her pert and spiteful sayings, without considering the ill nature they evinced. But I began to dislike more than to compassionate Linton, and to excuse his father in some measure for holding him cheap. He said till afternoon I could not tear Miss Cathy away before, but happily my master had not quitted his apartment, and remained ignorant for our prolonged absence. As we walked home, I would fain have enlightened my charge on the characters of the people he had quitted, but she got it in her head that I was prejudiced against them. "Aha!" she cried, "you take Papa's side, Ellen. You are partial, I know, or else you wouldn't have cheated me so many years into the notion that Linton lived a long way away from here. You are extremely angry, only I am so pleased I can't show it. But you must hold your tongue about my uncle. He's my uncle, remember. I'll scold Papa for quarrelling with him." And so she ran on, till I dropped, endeavouring to convince her of her mistake. She did not mention the visit last night, because he did not see Mr. Linton. Next day all came out sadly, to my chagrin. and still I was not altogether sorry. I thought the burden of directing and warning would be more efficient borne by him than me, but he was too timid in giving satisfactory reason for his wish that she would shun connection with the household of the Heights, and Catherine liked good reason for every resistance that harassed her petted will. Restraint. Papa, she exclaimed after the morning salutations, guess whom I saw, Papa, in the walk on the moors? Ah, Papa, you started. You've not done right, have you now? I saw, but listen, and you shall hear what I have found out. And Ellen, who is in league with you and pretended to pity me so when I kept hoping and was always disappointed about Linton's coming back, she gave me a faithful account of her excursion and its consequences, and my master, though he cast more than one reproachful look at me, said nothing till he had concluded, till he drew her to him and asked if she knew which she had concealed Linton's near neighborhood from her. Could she think it was to deny her a pleasure that she might harmlessly enjoy? It was because you disliked Mr. Heathcliff, she answered. Then you believe I care more of my own feelings than yours, Cathy? He said. No, it was because I disliked Mr. Heathcliff, but because Mr. Heathcliff dislikes me, and I am a most diabolical man, delighted to wrong and ruin those he hates. If he give him the slightest opportunity, I knew that you could not keep up an acquaintance with your cousin without being brought into contact with him, and I knew he would detest you on my account, and so, for your own good and nothing else, I took precautions that you would not see Linton again. I meant to explain this some time as you grew older, and I'm sorry I delayed it. But Mr. Heathcliff was quite cordial, Papa, observed Catherine, but not at all convinced, and he didn't object to our seeing each other. He said I might come to the house when I pleased, only I must not tell you, because you had quarrelled with him, and would not forgive him for marrying Aunt Isabella, and you won't. You are the only one to blame. He is willing to let us be friends, at least, Linton and I. You are not. My master, perceiving that she would not take his word for her uncle-in-law's evil disposition, gave a hasty sketch of her conduct to Isabella, and the manner in which Wuthering Heights became his prosperity. He could not bear to discourage long upon the topic, for though he spoke little of it, he still felt the same horror of detestation of the ancient enemy that had occupied his heart ever since Mrs. Linton's death. She might have been living yet, if it had been with him, if not been for him, was his constant bitter reflection, and in his eyes Heathcliff seemed a murderer. Miss Cathy, conversant with no bad deed except her own slight acts of disobedience, and justice, and passion, rising from hot temper and thoughtlessness, and repented of on the day they were committed, was amazed by the blackness of the spirit that could brood on and cover revenge for years, and deliberately prosecute its plans without a visitation of remorse. She appeared so deeply impressed and shocked at the new view of human nature, excluded from all her studies and all her ideas till now, that Mr. Edgar deemed it unnecessary to pursue the subject. He merely added, "You will know hereafter, darling, why I wish to avoid his house and family. Now return to your old employments and amusements, and think no more about them." Catherine kissed her father and sat down quietly for the lessons for a couple of hours, according to custom. Then she accompanied him into the grounds, and the whole day passed as usual. But in the evening, when she retired to her room and I went to help her undress, I found her crying on her knees by the bedside. "Oh, fie, silly child," I exclaimed. If you had any real griefs, you'd be ashamed to waste a tear on this little contrariety. You never had any shadow of substantial sorrow, Miss Catherine. Suppose for a minute the master and I were dead, and you were in your world by yourself, and how would you feel then? Compare the present occasion with such an affliction as that, and be thankful for the friends you have, instead of coveting more. "I'm not crying for myself, Ellen," she said. "It's for him. He expected to see me again tomorrow, for there he'll be so disappointed, and he'll wait for me, and I shan't come." "Nonsense," said I. "Do you imagine that he has through thought as much as you have of him? Hasn't he Hareton for a companion? No one in 100 would weep at losing a relation they'd just seen twice. For 2 afternoons Linton will conjecture how it is, and trouble himself no further about you. But may I write a letter to him why I cannot come?" she asked, rising to her feet, "and then sent those books I promised to lend her. The books are not as nice as mine." and he wanted to have them extremely when I told him how interesting they were. May I not, Ellen? No, indeed, no, indeed, when I replied I with decision. Then he would write to you, and there'd never be an end of it. No, Miss Catherine, the acquaintance had been dropped entirely, so Papa expects, and I shall see that it is done. But how can one little note, she commenced, putting on an imploring countenance. Silence, I interrupted. Will not begin with your little notes. Get into bed. She threw at me a very naughty look, so naughty that I would not kiss her good night at first. I covered her up and shut her door in great displeasure, but repenting halfway, I returned softly, and lo, there was Miss standing on the table with a bit of blank paper before her and a pencil in her hand, which she guiltily slipped out of sight on my re-entrance. You'll get nobody to take that, Catherine, I said, if you write it, and at present I shall put out your candle. I set the extinguisher on the flame, receiving as I did so a slap on my hand out of a petulant cross thing. I then quitted her again, and she drew the bolt in one of the worst, most peevish humours. The letter was finished and forwarded to its destination by a milk fetcher who came into the village, but then I didn't learn till some time afterward. Weeks passed on, and Cathy recovered her temper, though she grew wondrous fond of stealing off to corners by herself, and often, if I came near her suddenly while reading, she would start to bend over the book, evidently desired to hide it. I detected edges of those loose papers sticking out beyond the leaves. She also got a trick of coming down early in the morning and lingering about the kitchen as if she were expecting the arrival of some, and she had a small drawer in a cabinet in the library which she would trifle over for hours, and whose key she took especial care to remove when she left it. One day, as she inspected the drawer, I observed that the playthings and trinkets which recently formed its contents were transmuted into bits of folded paper. My curiosity and suspicions were roused. I determined to take a peep in the mystery treasure, so at night, as soon as she and my master were safe upstairs, I searched and readily found among my house keys one that would fit the lock. Having opened, I emptied the whole contents into my apron and took with me them to examine at leisure my own chamber. Though I could not suspect, I was still surprised to discover that they were a mass of correspondence daily almost. It must have been from Linton Heathcliff answering the documents followed by her. The earlier dated was embarrassed and short. Gradually, however, they expanded into copious love letters, foolish at the age of the written, rendered natural, yet with torches here and there, which I thought were borrowed from a more experienced source. Some of them struck me as singularly odd compounds of ardor and flatness, commencing in strong feeling and concluding in the affected wordy that a schoolboy might use to a fancied incorporate sweetheart. Whether they satisfied Cathy, I don't know, but they appeared very worthless trash to me, and turning over as many as I thought proper, I tried them into a handkerchief and set them aside, and relocking the vacant drawer. Following her habit, my young lady descended early and visited the kitchen. I watched her go into the door, and on the arrival of a certain little boy, and while the dairymaid filled his can, she trucked something out of her jacket pocket and plucked something out. I went round to the garden and laid wait for the messenger, who fought valorously to defend his trust, and we split the milk between us, and I succeeded in obstructing the epistle, and threatened serious consequences if he did not look sharp home. I remained under the wall and perused Miss Cathy's affectionate composition. It was more simple and more eloquent than her cousin's, very pretty and very silly. I shook my head and went meditating into the house, the day being wet, so she could not divert herself from rambling, and the park. So at the conclusion of the morning studies, she resorted to the solace of the drawer her father sat reading at the table, and I, on purpose, had sought a bit of work in some unripped fringes in the window curtain, keeping my eyes steadily fixed on her proceedings. Never did any bird fly back to a plundered nest which it has left brimful of chirping young ones, express more complete despair in its anguished cries from fluttering than she by her single and the change that transfigured her late happy countenance. Mr. Linton looked up. "What is the matter, love? Have you hurt yourself?" he said. his tone and look assured that he had not been the discoverer of the hoard. "No, Papa," she gasped. Ellen, come upstairs. I'm sick." I obeyed her summons and accompanied her out. "Oh, Ellen, you have got them," she announced. She commenced immediately, dropping on her knees when she was enclosed alone. "Oh, give them to me, and I'll never do it again. Don't tell Papa. You have not. Tell Papa. Say you have not. I have been exceedingly naughty, but I won't do it any more." With a grave severity in my manner, I bid her stand up. "So," I exclaimed, "Miss Catherine, you are tolerably far on, it seems. You may well be ashamed of them. A fine bundle of trash you study in your leisure hours, to be sure. Why, it's good enough to be printed, and that do you support the master will think when I display it for him." "What do you suppose the master will think?" "I haven't shown it yet, but you needn't imagine I shall keep your ridiculous secrets for shame, and you must have led the way in writing such absurdities. He would not have thought of beginning, I'm certain. I didn't, sobbed Kathy, fit to break a heart. I didn't once think of loving him till—" "Loving!" cried I, as scornfully as I could utter a word. "Loving! Did anybody ever hear the like? I might just as well talk of loving the miller who comes once a year to buy our corn. Pretty loving indeed, and both times together we have seen Linton hardly 4 hours in your life. Now here is your babyish trash is going with it to the library, and we'll see what your father says to such loving." She sprang at her precious epistle, but I held them above my head, and then she poured out further frantic entreaties that I would burn them, to do anything rather than show them, and being really fully as inclined to laugh as to scold, for I esteemed it all a girlish vanity, I at length relented in a measure, and asked, "If I consent to burn them, will you propose faithfully neither to send nor receive a letter again, nor a book, for I perceive you have sent them books, nor locks of hair, nor rings, nor playthings?" "We don't send playthings," said Catherine, her pride overcoming her shame. "Nor anything at all, then, my lady," I said, "unless you will, here I go." "Unless you will, here I go. I promised, Ellen," she cried, catching my dress. "Oh, put them in the fire, do. But when I proceeded to open a place with the poker, the sacrifice was too painful to be borne. She earnestly supplicated that I would spare her one or two, Ellen, to keep for Linton's sake." I unknotted the handkerchief and commenced dropping them in from an angle, and the flame curled up the chimney. "I will have you one, you cruel wretch," she screamed, darting her hand into the fire and drawing forth some half-consumed fragments at the expense of her fingers. "Very well, and I have some to exhibit to Papa," I answered, shaking back the rest of the bundle, and turning back to the door, she emptied her blackened pieces into the frame, and motioned me to finish the immolation. It was done. I stirred up the ashes and interred them under a shovel full of coals, and she mutely, and with a sense of intense injury, retired to her private apartment. I descended to tell my master that the young lady's qualm of sickness was almost gone, and I had judged it best for her to lie down a while. She wouldn't dine, but she reappeared at tea, pale and red about the eye, and marvellously subdued in outward aspect. Next morning I answered the letter by a slip of paper inscribed, "Master Heathcliff is requested to send no more notes to Miss Linton, as she will not receive them." And thenceforth the little boy came with vacant pockets. Chapter 8 for tomorrow. Thank you for listening.